Here at Wow Living TV, I've had the pleasure of sitting down with Dr. Colin Higgs before. He's part of the leadership team at Canadian Sport for Life, and here at this summit, you are here to speak. Dr. Higgs, so good to see you again.
Good to be back.
So, you know, I understand you're speaking on two topics, but the first one is really intriguing to me personally. You're talking about the teenage brain. Now, as a mother of a soon-to-be 19-year-old son and a soon-to-be 13-year-old daughter, give me the goods. Tell me what's coming.
Well, I think there's been a real change in attitude towards the teenage brain over the last 5 to 7 years. Teenagers have been known to make some bad decisions and take a few risks, and I mean, this is
very known
teenage behavior. In the past, I think we've thought of it as being aberrant behavior. There's something wrong with it. Let me just back up. If we see a baby who can't walk, we don't say that this is a failure or there's something wrong. We say, well, that's a normal stage of growth and they'll get to it. I think that's now the current thinking on the teenage brain, that those things that drive many of us mad, and I've been through those too, are actually necessary for them to break the bond with parents and move out into the wider world. And so there's lots of things that are interesting, like driving. When we put kids in a car on their own, they make exactly the same decisions about risk as adult drivers. When we put them in the car with their friends, they make bad mistakes, take far greater risks. And so one of the questions is, why do they take those risks? Because there is a reward from their friends of taking those risks. And so when we're working with athletes, we want them not to make errors of judgment, take too great a risk in sport situations. And so from a coaching point of view, this means that we've got to kind of remove the reward,
right,
so that they make better decisions. And so that's sort of one of the areas. The other area that I think has real implications for some sports is that at around age 12 or 13, there is a real shift in the time clock in the child or the adolescent's brain. All of a sudden, they start to produce the melatonin, which makes them sleepy later in the evening. They start to produce it through the night and later into the morning. And surprise, surprise, they're really tough to get out of bed.
Right.
The times at which they can make best decisions get shifted about 2 hours further into the day. And so, because we're brilliant, we ask for 5 o'clock practices in the morning. Right. And we send them to school at 8 o'clock, when physiologically it's completely the wrong time for doing some of those things. And so if you have to have a 5 o'clock in the morning practice, then it certainly shouldn't involve complex decision-making activities. If you're going to do some aerobic activity, perhaps some strength training activity, fine. But if you expect kids to make really good technical, tactical decisions, body's not ready for it at that time. So some school districts have actually moved their school day because of that.
And this makes perfect sense, and I totally can see this even in my own home.
Yep.
Now, the other thing that you're going to be talking about is talent identification here. Can you just speak very briefly to what that entails?
I can speak very briefly to that. There's almost no such thing. There are many myths about talent identification. But the reality is we don't know a great deal about who will reach the absolute peak. We know earlier in life that those people who became champions were pretty good at their sport. They weren't the best for their age, and they certainly were not near the bottom of the pile. But they usually come from about the top third of performances as they go through the developmental stages. I just would say National Football League, National Hockey League draft. These players have been watched for hundreds of hours. They've been through every test imaginable. And then I would suggest you go on and Google 100 worst draft choices to see how badly all of that can happen, even with adolescents or people who've gone past adolescence, fully mature, well-researched, well-scouted, and we're still not doing much better than chance amongst that group of predicting who will be the very best. We can do a pretty good job about who will be good. But in terms of predicting who's going to reach the very top, there's not much there. And so for me, that becomes an issue of early specialization, not putting kids into a single sport at a very early age and just saying, well, they're going to be the best hockey player, football player, whatever it is. We don't know. And so we get them in a lot of sports, let them develop a lot of skills, and eventually they'll gravitate to the ones that they're best at, most suited to, and like the most. And that's probably the message. So I would say it's not about talent ID. It's about retaining kids in the sport system long enough for them to show what they can really do.
You're always so full of great information, and I have to tell you, my cousin coaches in the NHL, played in the NHL. Yeah. He never played summer hockey. He played golf. He did all kinds of things, and he would be sitting, I know, at home right now saying, bravo. Coming from an expert like you, it's great to hear it, Dr. Higgs.
Well, good to be here, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, and of course, stay tuned because we always have lots of great interviews like this on Wow Living TV.